My name is Misty Kluesner. I'm a Digital Innovation TOSA in Campbell Union School District down the South Bay area. But I have a huge passion for creativity. I'm actually working on my master's right now for creativity and technology because those are the two things I love. So I kind of wanted to test out a new idea with you guys. So you're my beta crew. But the idea is I really want to bring creativity back into the classroom. I think it kind of got lost with the whole No Child Left Behind Act, and now even with ESSA, right? It kind of gets lost because we have this testing push all the time. And so before we even get into how to do it, I really want us to make sure that we know how we define creativity, right? Because we can't really do something until we actually know what we're talking about. So just talking with the people around you, thinking to yourself, like, when you think of the word creativity, like, how would you define that? What does that mean? Let's just take a moment, chat with people. What does creativity mean? So I'm hearing like a lot of conversations from people, which is so fun. So like, I'm hearing things on like, people are talking about how it's like being different, right? Thinking different, trying to explore things a different way. It doesn't always have to be art, things like that. The actual definition of creativity is originality and effectiveness. That's the whole idea behind it. It has nothing to do with art. It has nothing to do with using a certain part of your brain. It's just originality and effectiveness. Is it original? And does it actually meet the purpose it needs to do, right? Because you can make the most amazing original thing, but if it doesn't actually have a purpose, it's not following anything. That's the actual definition that like psychologists have come up with on creativity. But I really like to think of it also, because I think we get so stuck in creativity. I think a lot of us are programmed with creativity really being like art class, right? Or actually the fine arts portion of it is to reframe it more as creative thinking. Because really creativity or creative thinking is problem solving. You have a problem and you need to figure out how to go about and solve that problem. And so really you're using creative thinking. And so I kind of like to frame it that way, especially with students, so that they know, because thinking can happen anywhere, right? It doesn't have to just be in one domain. And so really thinking about creative thinking or problem solving as our framework for creativity in the classroom. So the creative process, it's really similar to the design thinking process. It's really similar to the engineering process. We start with preparation. And so this is as our job as teachers, right? We need to make sure they have the skills, they have the knowledge that they need to be successful with whatever problem or anything that they are thrown at to or that they're trying to solve. Then we go into the incubation phase. So that's where they're doing all the ideation and the brainstorming. They're coming up with all these things that they could try out. And then this is what is famous in creativity, is this moment, right? That aha light bulb insight moment. That's what we think of with creativity, even though there's all this work beforehand that a lot of times isn't acknowledged. And so a lot of times kids don't think that exists. They just think, oh, I'm magically gonna have this idea and got it. And if they don't ever get that idea, then they instantly think, I'm not creative, this isn't for me, and they move on. So really, this is a really small part of the creative process, and it's really where you're figuring out which of all these ideas that have been stewing around your brain actually is going to work. And then you put it into production, right? Whether it is in fine arts, whether it's in engineering, whether you are, cooking in the kitchen, whatever that may be. So that is actually the creative process as it's defined in those 4 steps. And the other thing is we need to make sure we forget the myths. So there's this myth, right, that it only takes place in the right side of our brain, right? Our left is our logic side, our right is our creative side. But really what creativity is those connections that happen across brain that really take these 2 ideas that don't seem connected and somehow coming connected. They do brain scans. They have never found any one specific area of your brain that lights up when you're doing something creative or doing creative problem solving. So it doesn't exist. Another thing is a lot of times only our gifted students need opportunities to be creative, right? We really only give like the kids that if they have that knowledge, then we give them those opportunities. If our kids are struggling, they don't ever get those chances. And really, that's what makes the learning meaningful for those kids. That's who we should really be making sure we're giving all kids opportunities to be creative. And lastly, it's exclusively related to artistic expression. Totally false. You can be creative anywhere. So why do we need to bring it back into the classroom? So according to the World Economic Forum, the top 3 skills that companies are going to value in 2020 are, the first one's complex problem solving, the second one's critical thinking, and the third one's creativity. Like they've actually said these are the top 3 skills our kids need to have. And a lot of our kids are leaving school without developing these. Critical thinking we're getting better at, right? School, our curriculum, we push that. Complex problem solving, it depends. Sometimes our kids really aren't given these multi-step problems that they can really chew on and struggle with. And creativity, I think a lot of times we do it if there's time, right? So it gets pushed to the back burner a lot, especially as our curriculum load gets bigger and bigger and our time gets smaller and smaller. So we need to make sure that our kids have these skills before they leave school. Ken Robinson, one of my heroes, he talks about how we are actually educating kids out of creativity. especially with the testing push. And a big part of that is because we never give them chances to mess up. We never give them chances to struggle and fail and actually try to problem solve. And so the whole thing is that if you're not prepared to be wrong, you're never going to come up with anything original, right? Because if it's right, chances are someone else has probably already figured that out. It's not an original idea. And we talked about, right, how creativity is something that is original and effective. So it could be effective, but if it's not original, you're not really pushing your creative thinking. So just something to keep in mind as we're really training our kids, right, trying to make sure that they're comfortable with making mistakes and failing and really pushing the boundaries a little bit. Because our kids are going to be the ones that are tasked with solving the big problems in our world, right? Climate change this generation's going to have to deal with the effects of it, and they're going to have to figure out how to hopefully make it work for us. We have the advent of AI coming in, and that's really going to affect a lot of what's happening and really shake up what's going to be happening in our world. There's a population overgrowth, and the lack of resources, they're not rising at the same level, so we're going to have some issues there. So there's a lot of things they're going to have to deal with, and they're going to have to do creative problem solving to be able to figure out answers to those. So how do we do this? So this is the fun part. All right, so the first thing is we want to build creative confidence. So creative confidence, as I said, creativity does not happen just in art class. Creativity can happen anywhere. So you need to really let your kids figure out where they shine, where their passions are, where they are confident. Because you can be creative anywhere. So I want you to think right now for yourself, like, what do you enjoy doing with your free time? Where do you shine? Where do you reach that state, it's called flow, where you can do it and you forget that time is passing? Because that's when you know that you're really in the task and you're really working. And think about that moment. Is there anyone that's willing to share? Kind of like one of their little areas that they're kind of like their area where they shine or where they kind of flow?
I'd say personally for me, it's actually when I'm actually in the design process. So I co-created a game with my students, right? Mm-hmm. And we made cards for the game. Think of Pokemon meets Uno,
okay.
With a focus on number sense. Okay? So they develop an idea, a card, and then it's brought to me, and I think of how it'll fit into the whole scheme of the game. You know, in terms of the actual meta, will it mess up everything? Will it overpower? There's things like that I have to consider. But when I'm doing it, I love doing it.
Awesome.
You know, so yeah.
Sweet. Do you have any gardeners in the room? Any cooks? Any people that like to cook? I'm definitely not one of those people. So like with cooking, right, like there's people you can throw a bunch of spices and stuff at them and they can magically make something. And I'm not one of those people, but that's creativity right there, right? They're taking all these things, they're solving a problem. Even athletes, right? If you play a sport, like being able to do the different plays or just being able to figure out where to go with something. Playing video games is definitely something where creativity and problem solving is involved. So it's just all these different things that maybe we don't think of require creativity and creative thinking, but it actually does. And so I think it's important for us to number one, model that for our kids and trying to like maybe share your passions and share where you are growing your creative confidence. And then also having our kids do that as well, right? So having them really think about, well, where do I shine? Where can I bring my creative confidence in? Because what's nice is as they build those skills up and they build that capacity up, it does transfer. Yeah.
I just thought of something that was really simple but cute that one of my students said on Friday when we were cleaning up after Fun Friday, which is just where they get to play board games and Legos and build and stuff. But I was going to help him put stuff away in our shelf, and he goes, no, Miss Richard, I'm really good at organizing. Let me take care of this. Awesome. So,
yeah. And if they love to do it, they love to do it, right? And that's where that motivation is then going to come in, and you just have to step back and let the magic happen. It's awesome.
A kid that wants to clean up and organize.
Yeah,
they're still out there. They're still out there.
But yeah, so that's the biggest thing, right? Is how do we first of all try to figure out what that is for their kids, and a lot of times our kids have a hard time figuring that out, especially as they get older. When they're younger, right, they can tell you all the things they love, but as time goes on, they're not really used to first being asked, and second, really identifying it. And so helping them start to figure out where is their creative confidence. I know with middle schoolers, especially, it's really tough to try to figure where that is for them. And so it's giving them those times to really dive in, doing that introspection, which we don't give them a lot of time to do most of the time. So building the creative confidence is huge. The other thing is you want to make sure you have a culture that they feel safe in, because, right, we talked about how with creativity, they're going to be making mistakes. And if you don't feel safe, you're not going to make mistakes, because you don't feel safe, and you want to make sure that you're, we're programmed to make sure that we are not putting ourselves at risk. So the first thing, embrace those mistakes with them. So if they make a mistake, use it as a learning process. Okay, why did we make this mistake? How can we learn from this? Coming up with a plan so that they can actually take that and move forward. And sometimes the best things happen from mistakes, right? We didn't mean for it to happen, but it took us on this little bird trail that ended up leading to something awesome. We also need to make sure we establish that growth mindset. A lot of times with our kids is they see the end product of something that someone's been, that has really worked really hard on something for years. I go to drawing just because a lot of people, right, they shut down, they'd say I'm not an artist, because they see what someone that's been drawing for 30 years, what they create. And they're like, well, I could never do that. And well, it's because that person's been drawing for 30 years and they've been working really hard and they've been pushing themselves and they're not having that fixed mindset on it. The same thing goes with math class, right? How can we use our creative problem solving in math class? How can we use our creative thinking when we're working with writing? Because a lot of times kids just shut down, I'm not a good writer, because they just decided that's not their thing. So trying to work on that growth mindset with our kids. Perseverance and not giving up is huge. Like I talked about, right, that whole process, right, we really only focus on that insight, that aha moment, but there's all this work and all this grind that happens beforehand to really get to that moment. So building that perseverance in our kids. And encouraging them to take risks. So when they don't get to take risks, if they don't give that option in our safe, controlled environment in class, then they're not going to be willing to try it out there. They need to realize that it's okay to take risks in a controlled, safe environment, so that way when they're in the real world, they have that confidence to push themselves that way. So building that moment into our class as well. And then also being comfortable with ambiguity. Because the whole idea is if you're doing something that has never been done before, that means you can't see where it's going to go, which means that you need to be comfortable with that. And a lot of times I know as teachers we have a hard time with that, because we definitely like to have everything planned out and we know where our day is going, right? Every minute's slotted out. And we're going to have to model all of these for our kids, so we need to be able to admit I don't know something. We need to be able to admit, let's go figure that out, or I made a mistake, so that our kids are then able to start being comfortable with that as well. So the ambiguity, or being comfortable with being comfortable with being uncomfortable, is kind of what we like to say for the kids too. So those are just some things to think about as you build your classroom culture. The other thing is to actually let your kids have some time to let their minds wander. And this goes for you too. I don't know if anyone's ever had that moment where, they call them the shower thoughts, right? When you're in the shower and then your moments of brilliance actually happen in the shower, or like when you're folding laundry. So there is actually a lot of science now that has been found, that talks about how when we are bored, our brain goes into default mode. And when it goes into default mode, all these connections start to happen. And those connections are actually what lead to those creative insights, those moments, right? Because it's this random idea and this random idea come together. And when we're it doesn't happen when we're forcing it. We need our brain in that default mode, and that only happens when we're bored. So there is an amazing TED Talk that I linked in the speaker notes on this slide. It's How Boredom Can Lead to Moments of Brilliance, and it's by Manoush Zomorodi. And she actually wrote a book as well, and I have it at the end of this presentation, called Bored and Brilliant. And it talks about how we actually need to allow ourselves to get bored in order to have these moments. And what's happening with the advent of technology, particularly smartphones in our pockets, is that we're never bored anymore. Because now when you stand in line at the grocery store, what do? You pull out your phone. When your kids are, in the car, what do? Pull out the phone, right? We're never getting bored anymore. And so we're not giving our brain chances to go into that default mode, which means that we're not giving all these opportunities for creativity. And same with the classroom, right? It's just time is the thing, and we never have enough, and so we never let our kids just kind of sit there and chew and let them let their brains turn off for a moment. So you can do things like wonder walks, where you go out with your class, and you might just be around your campus. If you live somewhere where you can kind of go off campus, going off campus, even as, having them all over the weekend go do a wonder walk, and just walking around and making note of, well, what do you wonder? What do you see? What do you notice? Sometimes it's nice to have a journal. They can, journal or draw pictures of anything that's popping into their brain. But just giving them that moment where they are not assigned to be thinking about a specific thing at this time. Give them just a chance to let their brain go wherever it wants to go. Mindfulness is also great. So kind of building in a daily practice of mindfulness for your kids. There's a great app that exists called Calm, and they actually they opened up a free to teachers version. So if you just Google the Calm mindfulness app, and so you can sign up for free as a teacher, and you get most of the premium stuff for free right now. And it does guided mindfulness practices, which is really nice. But even just taking a minute and focusing on your breath, right? And having kids do that, because it helps them we can't be creative when we're in a state of agitation or we're stressed, so bringing that down so that our brain can actually let those connections start to form. And then also just making sure we build in that time for reflection, right? A lot of times we do our lessons, and then the lessons end up going to the bell, and they never actually get time to reflect on all this information, all this thinking that they've been doing. So being very purposeful that reflection isn't the first thing pushed to the side when we're running out of time. And it could just be 1 minute. If you have more, do 5 minutes. But just time for our kids to really reflect on their thinking and on their learning and really how things connect to one another. Another big one is play. So play is huge. And a lot of times what happens is about after first grade, it goes away. If you ever walk into a kindergarten room, it's amazing, right? And even that's starting to go away because they're getting all the standards shoved down their throats too. And play is huge for creative thinking. And it changes what play looks like as our kids get older, right? So when they're younger, there's a lot of imaginative play. As they get older, you can still do things where your kids are doing role playing in the classroom. Reader's Theater is another great one. Giving them, if you know you're going to be doing something with some very hands-on manipulative type of material, just letting them play with it before you actually do the curriculum with it and explore it is huge. And then another one that I love to do, and I'm going to torture all of you, so I hope you're ready. You came ready to trust, right? We're in a safe environment. Is I love improv. So Nicole knows, Nicole's in my district, and we torture her all the time. So we're gonna do some improv today. This is not the improv that you think of with Whose Line Is It Anyway. We're not gonna go, right? That they're professionals and they are paid a lot to do what they do. But we're gonna play a couple games, and after each game, we're gonna kind of reflect on how that felt and where you could see this benefiting your kids. So if you're all willing to trust me, we're gonna go ahead and stand up. You might want to push in your chairs. So we're going to play a couple games. The first one, we're going to kind of get the energy going, right? Because I know it's right before lunch and all we want to do right now is think about food. This is called rock, paper, scissors war. So how this works is you're going to find a partner. Some of you might have played this before. This is a great energy booster. Is you're going to find a partner. You're going to rock, paper, scissors them. If you win, awesome, you're the champion. You're going to go find someone else to play. If you lose, you are now that person's personal cheerleader. And you're going to cheer for them. We want to make them get jealous next door. So you're going to cheer for them as loud as you can as they go fight. And then say we have our two teams, right? And then one team wins, then that team now becomes the cheerleader for the other team until we have our final champion. All right?
Love it.
You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing I recommend establishing is if you are a 1, 2, 3 shoot person, or if you're a 1, 2 go person. So find a partner and let's go.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
Awesome. So stay standing, so I'm gonna keep torturing you. But just reflecting, how would that, when you do that with your kids, why would you do that with your kids? What are the benefits? Maybe what are the things that make you worried about doing that with your kids? Thoughts again?
Team building.
Team building?
Brain break.
Brain break, yep.
Wake up in the morning.
Yeah, waking up if it's a...
I like the idea of encouraging, even if you lose, you know? You still, I teach my kids that when they don't win group points at the week, we still clap for that group that won because we're excited for them.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
I do a similar take on it, but instead of the typical rock, paper, scissors, it's with multiplication facts. So instead of showing the rock, the paper, the scissors, you would show a number 2 through 9 on your fingers, for example. And so if I chose 9 and say chose 9, the first person to say it wins.
Oh, the answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Cool, I like that.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet.
I just like that because it's you don't have to be the smartest kid in the room to win that, you know? And it could be the quietest, shyest kid could end up being the one the whole class is cheering for. That's a moment too.
Yeah. And I think
That they may not always get the opportunity to shine on.
And it totally boosts confidence because
true.
it feels good, to be cheered on and, but then also cheering you. So it's spreading that positiveness, around the classroom.
Because everybody's smiling. You're not smiling.
Yeah.
You're doing that. You don't even realize that you're smiling and having fun.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we're gonna try another one. This one's a little different. So this one we're gonna really work on our risk taking a little bit, and also just we're gonna keep working our creative thinking. So we'll kind of, I guess, say this is like the middle of the room. It works best if you have like a circle. So this one's called I'm a Tree. And some of you might have played this before. So how this works is the very first person, and I would go in and say, I'm a tree. And I would stand like a tree, however I want to be. And then another person would then come in and add to the scene. So something that would add to our scene and be that object. So I don't know if there's anyone. I'm gonna throw you under the bus. Nicole, you played this before. Sorry. So like,
I'm a rock.
I was going to do that.
I'm a frog.
Awesome. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. I'm a flower.
all right, and so we usually stop at like 4, just because we want, what's gonna happen now is all 3 of us are gonna leave, our flower is going to stay, so then we get to go back. And now it keeps going, so now if you wanna add to our flower.
I'm a worm. I'm the sun. Oh, that's a good one. I'm some water.
All right, awesome, so now our water's gonna stay, and our other people can go, so water's gonna stay, so now we can add to our water.
The fish. Nice. Fish.
I'm a bear.
I'm an octopus.
Awesome, so now our octopus is gonna stay. And if anyone wants to add to our octopus.
I'm a kraken.
I can't beat that. Come on.
I'm a starfish. I'm a fisherman. Fisherwoman, I guess.
Awesome, guys. Thank you for being brave. That's awesome. So again, totally different one, right? Like this was not necessarily like an energy booster one where we're like cheering each other on, but again, thinking about maybe like what worked for you, where this was comfortable, where this was uncomfortable, how you could see this with your kids.
And it's just one simple thing, you know, and it could just be like whatever pops in your head, and it could be like, and maybe you can even add to that after, like create a story using like whatever scene from that or whatever, Niagara Habitat, or create a visual or whatever, you know, like you're gonna add to that. What do you call this?
This one's called I'm a Tree.
I'm a tree.
I love it just to illustrate an actual setting.
Yeah.
You know, if we're reading a text and we're getting that visualization, well, let's go ahead and create it, you know, in a meaningful way, right?
Yeah.
So I like that.
And what would you do to make sure that everyone gets involved? Because I can see like certain
Yeah.
students always being one of the 4 and certain ones.
Oh, yeah.
So you can do things, so the first couple rounds, I always recommend just letting them do whatever they want, right? But as they get more comfortable, you can almost like the talking chips thing, right? Where maybe they have like their 2 chips or their 2 turns, right? And to make sure that happens that way. If they're not comfortable in being in front of the whole class and you have a bigger group, you could also do like 2 smaller circles to start and then build to that bigger moment. But what's really fun is as you do this, you'll notice in the beginning you'll get the same things kind of over and over again, right? I'm a squirrel, I'm a rock, I'm a bench. But what's cool is as kids start to get more comfortable with the game, they kind of get bored with those, and that's where you really start to get those creative ideas coming in, right? Where they really we get things like the Kraken that come in and, you know, like come and play. So that's what I love about it is that we have, you just get these cool ideas and they start to bring in their own personal interests into that game. And this is a really good one to practice divergent thinking as well, where they really start to explore possibilities. So we're gonna do one more, and what I'll have us do for this one is I'll have us just split into 2 groups. So this one's gonna be called Sound Story. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna get in your groups and you're each gonna come up with a sound effect. And I like to preface it with my kids as no bodily sound effects. So, but get with your group and just find somewhere in the room to stand or sit and just coming up with sound effects.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once you have your sound effects, just give me a thumbs up and I'll tell you your next thing. So you just wanna go around, so you each have your sound effects. So
Do we need to say it?
yeah, so perform your sound effects.
Okay, I think I got one.
You guys got your sound effects? All right, so your next thing now is you're going to put your sound effect, you're gonna create a story, and you can change the order. So you can do this 2 ways. You can either keep the order the same if you really wanna challenge them, or you can let them change the order. They now have to create a story that incorporates all the sound effects together as a group. All right?
Okay.
All right? You guys, okay, so I want you to practice it a few times, because then what I'm gonna have you guys do is actually perform your story for us. Usually with kids, what I have them do is I just have them record it like on their Chromebook or something, and then we just get the audio version of it. But we're gonna say spot, and there's
The
only
same
one other
or
group.
different one?
So your same story. So just keep practicing so you get comfortable with this, just so you're feeling comfortable too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you guys ready to at least try, right? We're gonna try. We're being comfortable being uncomfortable. So is there a group that's willing to go? All right.
On a windy day,
There was a group of campers roasting marshmallows.
Suddenly, a bee started to annoy the campers. Buzz.
And he got too close to the fire.
Wait, short life. Short-lived.
Thinking about this one, like, where would you use this with the kids? How do you see this helping with your classroom? Like,
It's because it's storytelling.
It's storytelling, yeah. It's getting them to use speaking and listening skills.
They could actually
Yeah.
go back and sit down and write it up and do a presentation or
Yeah, that could be
slide or
extensions.
something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I was hearing team building over here too, right? Like just building that community.
When I front load a comprehension skill, I tell students a story. So I can have like a student give me a sound effect that I have to incorporate into the story for them as I'm front loading that first skill.
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah, cool.
And I think it's also standing and give a change of pace, instead of just like being up or down,
Yeah.
type of thing. So
Yeah.
it just kind of gets that. I feel like
Yes.
just get a little more creative sometimes when you just stand and think about it, have a conversation, and then you're like, oh yeah, and then it just kind of comes free flowing.
And there's actually science that proves that after like going for a walk actually stimulates creative thinking. So like physical movement in general. So if you need to get your kids like before creative writing, just having them, move it somewhere else in the room just for a moment to get that going. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I'm done torturing you. You can sit down now. So that was improv, and the whole idea is, right, I'm again not talking about like whose line is anyway improv, but the tenets of improv, the first thing is that you're suspending judgment, right? So that's a huge thing, especially if you're thinking about creative thinking, right? A lot of times we'll shoot down ideas right away, or we'll shoot down each other's ideas because they're like, oh, that's a dumb idea, I don't want to do that. And so working on that suspending of judgment and being accepting until we really have a time to flesh things out and kind of see where it's going is huge. Also making sure that you're letting go of your agenda. So again, for that team building part of it, it's really huge. The whole point of improv is not to make myself look good, it's to make you look good. So that's what I love about it is, again, it's that working together, working collaboratively is huge, and building on what you receive. So when you had the sounds and the stories, you really had to build on what other people did. When we did I'm a Tree, you had to build. Whoever did something in the middle, you had to build off of that, right? You couldn't say, no, we don't want you to be an octopus, go away, right? You had to keep going with it. So just improv is a great way to really get that creative thinking going in the classroom. And if your principal walks in your room and says, oh my goodness, why are your kids all playing? This is horrible, right? You have standards, please teach them. There is tons of research about why play is beneficial. It promotes language development. It creates intrinsic motivation in our kids, which is always a struggle, especially as they get older. It actually is helped with, there's proof that it helps with stress management and with recovery from trauma. And a lot of kids are coming to us now with traumatic experiences, and we have to somehow, take care of that while hoping to teach them the standards. It promotes brain growth and development, and they've actually found that play, regardless if it's imaginative play, role playing, just kids playing with Legos, it stimulates the same processes in our brain that's needed for creative thinking. So you're still building that creative thinking capacity as they're playing. So it's actually a great thing to do before you go into a creative activity. The other thing that's huge, and this is probably the most closely linked with creativity, is the idea of divergent thinking. So in our classrooms, a lot of times you really have our kids do convergent thinking where they come in on this one same idea. Whereas with divergent thinking, the idea is you're starting here and you're looking at all the possibilities you could go through. So we want to make sure that we're giving our kids opportunities to grow this skill, because there are science that proves you can improve as a divergent thinker. Most of us are great at it as little kids. If you think of all the questions a 4-year-old asks you versus how many questions a 6th grader asks you, it goes away. So we want to make sure we build this skill up, and if you keep practicing it, it actually will grow. And there's some activities that you can do with this one. One of them is, if you've ever seen an activity where they say, here's a paperclip, I want you to come up with as many ways as you can use it, right? And what they find is that kindergartners can come up with 100 ways to use a paperclip. Adults can come up with about 10. And it's because it's something that we just don't practice. It's a skill that we lose. So that is a great way to practice it. There's also a fun improv game that's similar to this. It's called the Two-Headed Expert. And what it is you pick 2 objects in the room and you combine them. So like it might be like iPhone skateboard. And then it becomes, so now those 2 people have to tell you about the iPhone skateboard. Right? So that's something you can even do off the top of your head in the classroom. That's a very similar thing. And again, it's not meant to be this huge project. It's just supposed to be like a little 2 to 5 minute exercise of just getting your kids working on those divergent thinking skills and really kind of pushing themselves out of what they normally are doing. So divergent thinking is huge, and it's one of the most closely linked skills to creative thinking that is there. It's actually usually what they test for when they're testing creativity. However, no one's actually figured out how to test for creativity effectively yet, because it's so ambiguous. The other thing in your class is to allow choice. So kids are intrinsically motivated when they are passionate about what they're doing, right? So we talked about that creative confidence and where you reach that state of flow and it's something that you're interested in. And intrinsic motivation is huge for creative thinking. If we're not motivated, we're not going to push ourselves out of the box, right? And really think about different ways to try things. So we want to make sure that we're allowing choice in our classroom. So that can be things like no more recipe projects. So John Spencer calls them recipe projects, where you give them step-by-step what to do, and every kid's final project looks exactly the same, and they hang on your wall for back to school night or for open house. And we want to stop that, because there's no choice for the kids in that, right? You're telling them literally how to do something. So giving them more freedom in how they're doing and showing their learning to you. Choice menus are huge. So especially with the whole digital, right, with technology, you can have kids create videos, you can have kids do podcasts, they can do audio recordings, they could make a slide deck, they could go home and create a recipe that represents this. There's so many different ways that kids can show their learning. So giving them some choice, and you might start simple, you just might give them 2 or 3 options. And then as the year goes and they become more comfortable with different tools, that menu can grow. But giving them some choice in the matter instantly ups the intrinsic motivation, because they're bringing in some of their own personal talents and they feel like they have some autonomy in the classroom. And the other thing is passion projects and Genius Hour are huge, because it shows the kids that you validate their passions and their interests. It's just like when if you have an adult administrator or a boss that says, hey, it seems like this is something you're interested in, like, can you like develop this or like kind of play around with this for us, right? Like that's validating to you. And a lot of times what happens is then you're willing to kind of do that on your own time because it's something you're interested in. And the same thing goes with our kids. So trying to build those into it, even if it's just 15 minutes a day, right? Giving them 15 minutes to really like dive into and work on something that they're passionate about and that they're interested in. And you're going to find again with those middle schoolers that they sometimes don't know what that is. And so that really builds in that time for them to really think about their direction of where they maybe want to go in life. Well, what are you passionate about? What are you interested in? Inquiry-based assignments are huge. So design thinking, that little Protobot website's a great intro to design thinking and the whole design sprint process. John Spencer and AJ Giuliani have a lot of resources on design thinking if that's something you're interested in. But that whole process is huge and really helpful for creative thinking, even project-based learning, because again, it's a little more open-ended. You're not controlling every part of it is really good. And then also essential questions. So having a big essential question, and that helps you guarantee you're going to hit your standard, but it lets you kind of go off in different directions and then come back to it. A great resource, and I linked it toward the end of this, is the Right Question Institute. Has a lot of resources on creating working on creating questioning strategies. And the same thing goes with having your kids start to ask the questions. Instead of asking for the answer, ask them for the question. If they have a question for you, don't answer it. Put it back on them, right? So stop being the supplier of all the information for them. We also need to make sure that we're valuing the process and not just the product. So a lot of times, right, kids never get feedback until they turn that final thing into you and they find out how they did, but we've already moved on, and you've also, again, it seems like we're only valuing that one piece versus all of that struggle that went before it. So we want to make sure that we're being very constant with our feedback. It doesn't have to be super in-depth. It can be just like a mini one-on-one, like 2-minute conference. This is where you are, or I see this is something that we can keep working on. Let's keep going. But bringing that feedback in constantly for our kids, having peer feedback is huge. But just making sure that we're valuing the whole creative process, not just that little moment, right, that we see at the end is really big. So some things to recommend for you if you want to get into some heavier reading. These are kind of the books that inspired me. Bored and Brilliant is the one all about how boredom actually leads to creative thinking. A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. He actually is coming out with a new book in October that's more geared toward education. So I'm excited to see what that is. But his is all about the power of questions. Creative Confidence by Tom Kelly and David Kelly. IDEO and the Stanford D School are kind of their babies. And it's a great one to really about how we build that confidence in our kids and in ourselves. And it's, again, how creativity is everywhere and we all are creative. So when we say we're not creative, you're lying. And then Creativity Inc. is from Pixar, and like the whole process of creativity there. So those are some things I recommend if you want like a book to read that's going to make your brain kind of think about it a little bit more. And then some resources. That book is the book that has some great improv games in it that are all kid friendly, and there are different ones for like team building versus more like working on our storytelling skills. So that's a great resource. That links to the Stanford D School, which has a lot of resources on design thinking to explore. And then the one down at the bottom is the Right Question Institute. And they have a lot of resources on question development and the QFT strategy to get kids and you forming like heavier, thicker questions in your classroom. And that's it. And then we appreciate your feedback, so CapCUE, so please make sure you go there and give them some feedback. But yeah, thanks for coming, guys.